Hello and welcome to the new episode of The Film Angle. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We've got a big dumb blockbuster to talk about today. And I think that's fair to say about pretty much every Marvel movie that's being released recently. I'm more of like the reluctant skeptic when it comes to the Marvel universe, multiverse, whatever you want to call it nowadays, Alex. You're more versed in these sort of things. Were you excited for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania? Or was it just me?
So if anybody listens to the podcast already knows that I'm the resident Marvel fan. I'm the guy who is pretty easy to win over on most Marvel films. But the Ant-Man films are probably the ones that I don't like the most. And I can't say I was very excited for this film. And
Okay.
if anything, it was the introduction of Jonathan Majors as Kang that was kind of the exciting part. But yeah, I don't care for
For
Ant-Man,
sure.
and the trailers didn't do anything to make me feel like I should get excited for this film.
So what is it about? Is it the character himself that you're not that attached to? Because I know you obviously have a background of reading the comics and you're sort of an avid fan. Did you kind of come into Ant-Man with that sort of idea that you weren't as big a fan of him, or was it just the way that the movies are done and they're filmed?
I mean, I guess like I've never been very into Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like, not that I've disliked them in the comics; they're just characters that are there. They're never ones that I've kind of seeked out any of their own kind of solo adventures anyway.
Hmm.
But Marvel have a good track record of kind of creating films that warm you into the characters that you know less about anyway.
Sure.
But I don't feel the Ant-Man films have really done that for me so much. I like the casting as of Paul Rudd as Scott Lang,
Yes.
but I mean Scott Lang's not the main Ant-Man really in the comics. It might be now, but originally it's Michael Douglas's character Hank Pym, who
Right.
is
Okay.
he is the Ant-Man. He's not an old man in most of the comics. He's just like a
Interesting why
normal
they
dude.
chose to pick Michael Douglas as that character, though. But you know, but you couldn't have Michael Douglas doing all these things now. People would, not take the brand as seriously. I can understand why they probably shifted to Paul Rudd. And Paul Rudd's a really like charismatic presence. Like I enjoy him in the movie. I think he is one of the stronger things of the Ant-Man franchise is his sort of, out of costume charisma and his sort of ne'er do well sort of like free flowing attitude where nothing sort of like bothers him and everything is kind of overcomable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
I
I
think there's more comedy with his character as like an ex-con. And I think when Edgar Wright was originally attached to direct the Ant-Man film, that's
mhm.
probably why he went down that route. And
Yes.
maybe Marvel had a hand in that because you were about to have, Hank Pym is just another scientist character who turns
Yeah.
into a superhero kind of thing. So like we've had a few of those in the Marvel films already. He's actually a wife beater in the comics as well.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of like that's a very likable trait in the character. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, they've never really delved into that dark side of him too much. I think he's got a bit of a short temper in the first Ant-Man film, or is it the second? I can't remember.
Oh,
But that's kind of
yes.
completely disregarded in Quantumania, as we'll talk about coming up.
Well, they kind of phase that out. I haven't had a strong relationship with Ant Man. The first movie I watched a few years ago, and then I actually rewatched it a couple of weeks ago in preparation for this, and then I never seen Ant Man and the Wasp before Quantumania. So I did a bit of homework before catching up with this movie. The first movie, like the character of Pym is, you're right, he's a bit cranky, but they kind of transition him into like the cranky one-liner guy who has a little bit of a love-hate relationship with Scott Lang, and I actually think that's kind of one of the stronger things in the franchise. I think him and Paul Rudd really bounce off each other really, really well, and I think the second and third this movie, particularly, that's the kind of stronger elements. I think Ant-Man ultimately is at its best when the stakes are really low and the comedy is just kind of in full flow. And that's not a compliment I usually give to most Marvel movies. Usually, more recently, like Thor, Love and Thunder, that was to its detriment, where that just felt like, a himbo clown just sort of prancing for the universe with no sort of care or stakes involved. Where Ant-Man, where the character is kind of inherently silly, um, and the stakes are low because you're literally in a quantum realm. You know, he is. We're meant to feel like this story is gargantuan, but in fact, this is the smallest story we've seen in Marvel to date. But I think that's really well leaned on to, and I kind of like the movies for that reason.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I think a lot of people saw the first Ant Man in particular as a bit of a palate cleanser after the Avengers film. Going back to a slightly smaller story and is a little bit more whimsical. And I have no problem with that. I kind of like that Marvel is maybe not, or at least previously was not trying to be as coherent and just tell kind of singular stories. Obviously, that
Yeah,
seems to have kind of been pushed aside now. I just, I wanted a bit of a palate cleanser. I think after Endgame, and maybe we got a bit of that. But Marvel have been struggling with their results recently. For every Wakanda Forever, there's a Thor: Love and Thunder, and their films don't seem to be hitting as hard. And you know me, I was a big fan of Wakanda Forever. I might have overpraised it, but I thought that was one of their more decent films in recent memory. And then Quantumania came out and just kind of sucked all the energy I had from Marvel
yeah.
again.
Well, the thing is, I think what they're really struggling with at the minute is that they are teasing bigger things ahead, but we have no grip on what that could be. It feels like these big movies are part of something extra, but we just can't get a grip on what it is, and it feels like we're in a moment of misdirection, or just not knowing where we're going to go next, and we're just producing content for the sake of content.
Mm.
Um, I just kind of, you know what? I kind of went into this movie thinking that it was probably going to be one of the worst Marvel movies to date. The praise was very lacking. I think this is one of the lowest reviewed by critics for all the Marvel movies, actually, apart from maybe Iron Man 2, which I think, everybody kind of agrees isn't one of the strongest ones. But I kind of came in here with low expectations, and I actually kind of came out kind of enjoying this movie. I don't think it's as good as Ant Man and the Wasp, but I think it's better than the first Ant Man movie. And yeah, I know you don't agree with me, Alex, on this.
Maybe. I mean, I don't. I
The
think I think you're right. I think you're right about Ant Man and the Wasp. I think I came out of Ant Man and the Wasp enjoying it, but then
mhm.
you know your thoughts on these films sometimes kind of degrade a bit over time, and I haven't kind of looked back at Ant Man and the Wasp fondly.
Yeah,
Um,
it's worth revisiting. I think the stakes in Ant Man and the Wasp are the lowest. The whole point of that movie is the rediscovering of the mother, played by Michelle Pfeiffer.
yeah,
That's the whole kind of plot of the movie. We want to find her and get her back from the quantum realm. There are signs that she might still be alive, and it's a very small, sort of insular story. And the rest of the movie is just a full blown comedy. It's kind of a lot for me. It was laugh a minute. And that's really rare for a Marvel film for me. I kind of went along for the ride. I really enjoyed the Louise character. I was so sad that he was missing from this movie because he was the glue of the first two Ant-Man movies, keeping it together. The first Ant-Man movie is just kind of really bland. It's not even really shot interestingly. It makes you like yearn for the version we would have got from Edgar Wright if he had managed to pull the project together, and it felt a bit more of like a safe and secure steal movie, which is, nobody really wants that, especially as we've seen so many Marvel movies now. And if you're going back to Ant Man now, that can be a little bit boring. And well, I've just seen this movie 100 times over. Quantumania is so different because it is wall to wall insane. It is a mental movie. It is kind of like a Rick and Morty episode mixed with Star Trek, mixed with Star Wars. Um, it is kind of it's going for it, and
is it?
I thought it had a charming Saturday morning cartoon sort of world building aspect to it. There was loads of really weird humanoids, gloopy organisms. The performances are kind of mostly fun and good. I mean, Bill Murray comes into it at one point, and you're like, "Oh, buckle up here. We're going to have some fun one-liners." But then it's like, "Oh, do you even know what movie you're in, dude?" It's like there's no sort of the one liners that he's pulling out. It doesn't feel like he even knows what he's saying, and it doesn't. They just kind of fall flat. But Michael Douglas, he pulls out the bag. I think he's so funny again in this. I think he again was the strongest part of the movie for me. Um, what did you think about his performance?
Yeah, I did like Michael Douglas. It is very much just kind of the one-liners. For him, he doesn't get as much to do here. He's just a guy who likes ants, which isn't
He likes ants. Yeah, that's right.
his kind of character type is kind of just like stripped down to the very basic elements in this film. I kind of want to like you say about this being like very much like a Rick and Morty episode, a lot of world building and stuff like that. I although I appreciate the kind of crazy designs, and I mean maybe it's worth saying as well for the audience that don't that haven't seen it. You know, this is Ant-Man, Scott Lang, his daughter, his girlfriend Hope, who's the Wasp, Hank, his mentor, and his wife, who's just come back from the quantum realm, all being sucked back into the quantum realm, only to
Mm-hmm.
find that Hope has been essentially kind of downplaying what the quantum realm is. It is this kind of micro universe, and it is ruled by a nefarious kind of conqueror called Kang. And if he was to regain full power, he will essentially escape the quantum realm and go on to destroy universes. Spoilers will follow for anybody worried about this.
Mm.
But I didn't like the quantum realm, and I didn't like it. Was just it felt like
Purple, too purple.
everything. All right. So I like the designs. I like all the kind of weirdness going on. That's great. I always think like comics are weird, and the film should represent this. But it felt like everything was just thrown at the screen with not much thought,
Mm.
and I don't think
Okay.
the world building was particularly good. Like, is this when they say this is a universe? Are we talking like a planetary universe? Like, are there civilizations of broccoli head people? Are there civilizations of gloopy aliens that like holes?
Yeah.
Like, and also, why do some people look human and
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
human? But I just the rules of the quantum realm don't make any sense to me, and I don't think there was any thought into trying to make them make sense. It was just like, oh, look, we're all quirky, and it looks like
Yeah.
Steve Ditko artwork, and it's like it's not. I've wanted Marvel to really embrace the weirdness side of comics and kind of really take us down a different route
I
than
think you got that. I think you got the weirdness here.
we got the
100%.
weirdness in the visuals, but we just didn't get anything better in the story. Like the story needs to hold up the visuals, and it's still a very generic story. And they disregard any kind of character development from the previous films. Like it was fun to see Hope come back in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and to see what is next for her story would have been
Yeah.
really interesting. But she's very much a
He is
guide for this.
sidelined here. Yeah, 100%.
And you have this interesting relationship where Paul Rudd has lost all this time with his daughter because of the events of Endgame. And they're kind of at odds with the fact that he's not as motivated as being a hero, despite saving the world. I think that gives him a pass personally. He doesn't have to care so much anymore. He's done the
Mm.
job. And they're at odds with each other about that, but that doesn't really come into anything. And then you have Evangeline Lilly playing Hope, and she hasn't seen her mother in so long. And there's a dynamic there that could have been played out that kind of parallels what Scott
Sure.
Lang is going through with his daughter, but they never really do any of that. And yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer just becomes this guide in this universe.
Yes.
And she holds on to so much information for no reason. She's constantly saying, like, oh, I should have told you this before. And then, like, hours pass and they're still traveling through the quantum
Yeah.
realm. And she hasn't told them, like, who Kang is. Like, all this information just because, we, the audience, need to be revealed it at some point.
It's a shame for Pfeiffer, isn't it? Because I don't think it's a fault of her own. I think I think she's always been an interesting actress, but she's held ransom to the expository dialogue,
Oh,
and she is, like you said, she is being reduced to tour guide status, and she's not given every character gets to be funny, but she doesn't get the chance to be, and we need to be connected to her. She's the character that we've been looking forward to coming back. She's the whole plot device of the last movie. So we gotta kind of get why she was so special, and we gotta understand the relationship between her and her daughter.
yeah.
There's, yeah, you're really right. There's emotional stakes that were lost because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it felt like anything that they were building up to in the last two films. And again, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not mad because I didn't particularly enjoy the last two films either. But it just felt like everything was disregarded to have this kind of quirky look at the quantum realm, which essentially was just all these actors in front of a green screen, and it looked awful. It looked
Oh,
really, really bad. The scene where all of a sudden it cuts to like Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas and Evangeline Lilly like being encountered by these rebels
yeah,
in this open desert space. You can see the feathering on their on their heads where it's kind of like not been
right.
melded into the world so much. Everything just feels so flat and
I don't know.
awful.
I was really surprised. I actually thought it was going to look a lot worse. I thought like the last couple of entries looked a lot. I think at least I could see this movie, Wakanda Forever. The action scenes were like almost pitch black. I couldn't see what was going on. I thought the use of the volume in the last previous films was really really distracting. I could always see the foreground and where the foreground ends and the screen meets. I didn't feel like I saw it that bad in this movie. But then again, I didn't see this movie in IMAX like I did previously, and I could really see the seams then. So maybe if I saw in IMAX, I would have really like noticed all the hiccups.
Yeah, maybe. Or I don't know. Maybe I didn't see it at IMAX. Maybe we saw different films. I thought I could see the seams a lot. I felt like everything just felt like this flat world. Everybody was just stood in front of green screens. There was no depth. And obviously that is something that you have to overcome when you're working with green screens. And as we know, the
Sure.
Marvel VFX guys are completely overworked at the moment, and
Yeah,
they
there's
haven't
no
got enough
secret.
time to complete these things. And I think this is where it was the most obvious that they didn't have the time to perfect what was going on screen. And it felt like this film was like, oh, we can just shoot this in a warehouse on a green screen. It'll be easy. It's fine. Like, we don't have to spend 250 million on it. We only spend 150 million. But that makes me argue as well. When you've got 150 million to tell any story you want to tell,
Yeah, sure.
this is the story you want to tell. It's rubbish.
Alex is mad. He is furious.
I just think like wasted an entry of another interesting character we could have seen instead, or an interesting story.
You got Modoc.
All right, I will give him Modoc because even though it's very weird with Modoc. Okay, it's very weird. I like the fact that Modoc's in it. I like the fact that he looks like Modoc from the comics. I
He
can't
looks
tell
like
whether
a
it's
thumb.
I can't tell whether it's bad CGI or it's just uncanny because some things just don't
Both.
translate well
It's
from
both.
comics to screen. I love the fact that Modoc's in it though, and I will say I think he is one of my favorite parts.
Because it's just such a whiplash from the rest of the movie you've been seeing. I mean, even though the rest of the movie's been so wacky and whimsical, you just get this whiplash of this character turning up, and it's a really I didn't expect it at all because I didn't know what to expect coming in this movie, but yeah, it was funny. I mean, I thought the scenes were really really good.
They were good, but it did feel slightly jarring to some of the stuff.
Yeah,
Like tonally, this film's a little all over the place because I think it wants to be wacky, but it also wants to be really like dark and serious and really show you how much of a formidable villain that Kang is,
yeah.
and
What do we
they
think about
kind of
him?
clash against each other. Yeah, I think Jonathan Majors did a really good job. I like Kang. Did they make him formidable? I don't know, because at the end of the day, he's just like his weakness is just a really big dude kicking him in the head, uh,
Mm,
like
and ants, and ants.
an ants. So if this is the guy that's gonna take on the mantle of Thanos, and
I think he was promising at the beginning of the movie when we kind of get the tease of him and not knowing exactly what's going on, the machinations kind of going on in his brain. I think he does the quiet seriousness very, very well. And then
yes,
once it gets a little bit louder and the third act big, sort of penetrating the shield headquarters, video game sort of final boss battle, I think he then becomes a little bit more um, larger than life and a little bit more hammy,
yes,
which
and the
which is disservice to him. I think he's such a promising actor. I think we've seen him in movies like the last Black Man in San Francisco. He was incredible in,
yeah,
and I think people are really really excited for him. I think there's still promise, but he's pigeonholed with a script, I think that makes him have to be loud and raspy, and it kind of just loses that seriousness and edge that he had at the first half of the movie.
Yeah, it he's not made a. I wouldn't say like he's made the biggest impact on the Marvel universe just yet. Like
Mm.
I liked him, and I'm interested to see where it goes. But I can't imagine that general audiences are going to leave here being like, "Oh, this is the next Avengers level threat." Um,
No, because we've already seen him being beat.
yes, by Ant-Man of all people.
Yeah, and the movie does its best by trying to make it a bit more ominous and sort of scary, and what we've got to look forward to by having the end credits, having him show up in his other versions, thousands of them. So the only thing that we're going to get next time is a higher volume of Kang. That's our sort
Yeah,
of and but we've already seen him be defeated, so there's the stakes aren't high, and we don't know to what end he wants to destroy the multiverses, the lateral universes, whatever. But yeah, I mean, we've seen it done before. I think are we tired of big villains wanting to destroy things? Is that enough for us? Can we not go back
maybe.
to the smaller stories where we got Spider-Man 2, where we get a Doc Ock who just really wants to, you know, he wants to achieve a scientific, he wants to save his wife, he wants to do something small, and like that's more personable, and we can latch on to that easier. I
Yeah.
think we need to go back to that type of storytelling, and I think that's what people really are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to go street level with Spider-Man and Daredevil and all those kind of guys. Like
Mhm.
that's where I prefer my Marvel stories. Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess like the one good thing you could say about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is the fact that it still feels like a very much a standalone film, despite it setting up Kang. Like there's still a beginning, middle, and end to this, where Kang has been defeated, potentially dead, probably not, and there's a resolution to the story. I don't feel like there was any resolution to any character arcs. I feel like that nothing really went anywhere.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you heard, but the ending of this film was completely reshot only a few months ago.
Oh, right,
Um,
okay.
so I mean, I don't know how accurate this is, but it definitely felt like potentially this is where we were leading. Is that at the end, Ant-Man and the Wasp were going to be trapped in the quantum realm. They'd sacrificed themselves essentially to save the other characters, and they were going to be trapped there. It definitely felt like that's potentially where we were going, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like a portal opens behind them, and they're like, "Oh, off we go." I hated the ending of this film because it just treated it so strangely. You had Scott Lang walking around the city doing his usual stuff, being like,
Yeah.
we saved the day, ha ha ha. Or did we? Oh, never mind. Don't imagine we'll hear from that guy again. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, yeah.
Such a weird, I don't know, it's such a weird, bland way. And maybe it's winking at the audience, but it just felt like it was treating us like idiots. I'm not really sure. Just didn't like the ending either. Didn't like any of it.
That's a
I
it,
like Paul Rudd.
I
That's
like
it.
Paul. Yeah, he's great. I think no matter what, Alex, though, if they release another Ant-Man next year, you'll be there day one as well.
That's the stupid thing, isn't it? It's the stupid thing where Marvel have trapped me. I've seen like every Marvel film in the cinema, and I would struggle not to see the next one in the cinema because I feel like I don't know they've sucked so much money at me. I'm such a
Well,
Marvel shill.
we'll see going forward. There's only so much goodwill you can take. Can they do that for years and years and years, producing mediocre content and then fade out their audience? We'll see.
Well,
There's a lot of legs in this thing, obviously.
the latest thing is that with who's the new CEO of Disney, and he used to be the CEO of Disney. Is it Bob Chapek or is it Bob Iger?
Bob Iger, that's right.
He's the new CEO, right?
Yeah, he's returned after the
So
last CEO kind of messed everything up.
yes, pretty much. And I think he's come in and he's said now, like, we need to slow these things down. So they're already saying they've already pushed a couple films this year. So the Marvels is going to be coming out November instead of July, and they're slowing down on the TV production. So originally it was going to be like 3 or 4 TV shows this year. Apparently now there's only going to be 2, which is going to be Secret Invasion and Loki.
Hmm.
And they're delaying everything so they actually have time to kind of make it the best version of what it is. So potentially the Marvel universe is going to get better going forward
Right.
because like I think even in Wakanda Forever, which I really enjoyed, that final battle scene, you could see the seams,
It
and the
suffered, yeah.
CGI did not stand up to like the rest of the film. I thought looked really good. I know you thought it was too dark. I thought it looked really good, but those kind of final scenes out in the water just don't hold up. And I think slowing things down for a bit might be the best way forward for these films. I have one last point which I didn't get to make, but it also makes me upset. Can I talk about this, Chris?
You
Will
go
you
for
allow
it.
me to rant for another minute?
That's all right.
This film's called Ant-Man and the Wasp. The
Yeah.
Wasp has nothing to do in this film. She is
Yeah,
a
we
supporting
said it
character.
already. Yeah, she's
She-
sidelined in this movie for
She's
sure.
she's a supporting character in Ant-Man and the Wasp as well. I feel like they've never truly given her main character status. I don't think.
Sure, she is the love interest who can kick butt a little bit. That's kind of her
I
character, yeah.
I forgot until the end of this film where Scott and Hope kiss. I forgot they were in a relationship.
Yeah, and they are separated for the majority of the film too.
Yeah, I absolutely forgot. And
Yeah.
Hope has nothing to do. She has no character arc. The fact that they put her in the title, which I know they have to because they can't really go back on it after the last one, is kind of rubbish. They should have given, like Paul Rudd is the main character of this film, no doubt.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. I think she has a smaller role in this movie than she did even in the first or second movie. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. As you can
Uh,
see, Quantumania, I don't
He's
know.
he's not a happy chap. I
I
thought it
like
was
Nobel.
fine. I thought it was like a good breathing space between a palate cleanser. I thought it was kind of fun, distracting, not overly. I don't know. It's a headspace thing, isn't it? It depends where
Yeah.
you are this franchise. I distance myself enough from it for periodically that I can come in and kind of see it for what it is. I thought the characters were mostly charming. I did enjoy the zany world building this time around, and yeah, it's not perfect. It's not going to stick a lot around in my memory. I'm probably not going to rewatch it, but for what it was for a Saturday afternoon at the cinema, it's a pretty fun distraction.
That's fair. I guess, there's fun to be had. I don't know. Maybe watching too many of these BFI films, Chris. And
Your standards are way, way, way too high.
yeah, when you watch a real film and then you see 150 million spent on this, you're like, what?
Yeah, what you can achieve. Well, that's a pretty good segue on to actually talking about the movies that we caught up with on the BFI list, right, Alex?
If anybody's wondering, I think we skipped a couple of entries because we've already seen them. I don't think we mentioned that last week. Like The Shining was on there. I know Parasite has been on there. We've seen these films. They're both really great films, and we don't need to talk about them. So we're only watching the blind spots that
Which
you and I
is
have,
most of the list still. So it's not
which
like
is
we're
the
skipping
most.
over a lot.
No, we're not skipping over those.
Yeah, so that leads us into 1953's The Earrings of Madame de. Try saying that 3 times when you're really drunk. This is a movie I knew nothing about. This is directed by Max Ophüls. Is that Ophüls?
Yeah, I don't really know how to say his name, but we'll go for it. Offals.
It centers around. It's set in France in the late 19th century. It is worth saying that this movie is in French as well. It centers around the wife of a wealthy general. She is called the Countess Louise, who sells her earrings that her husband give to her on their wedding night, and to pay off some secret debts that she's got going on behind his back. She then kind of claims to him that she's lost them during an opera one night, and it sets off a sort of cataclysm of events that her lies have led to. So there is another love interest. Her earrings are then found at a marketplace is it in Turkey, in Istanbul?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And this guy discovers the earrings there at a shop window. He buys them, and he comes back to Paris, and he forms a coincidental connection with the Countess at a sort of passing trains moment. And yeah, it starts off. The husband, in the meantime, he kind of knows that there's something going on. The guy that she sold the earrings to has came to the Count, the general, and has said that the wife has sold them to him, and he wanted him to know. And so the husband secretly knows about this, and he's on the trail, but he's not letting the wife know about it. And everybody has their own little story going on here. Everybody has their own little agenda,
Yeah.
and you're just seeing things kind of map out, and it gets cringier and cringier because you know where it's going, and things are getting prolonged, and the stakes are getting higher.
Well, I
Um,
think that's the best thing about the film, isn't it? Is like it it doesn't hide anything from the audience. The audience are the only people in the know of everything going on in this film. The
yes, that's
characters
right.
themselves only have little pieces of the story. We as an audience have it all, and that almost makes it more entertaining for us knowing because we can see both characters thinking in different ways on the screen at the same time. That was my favorite element of the film, anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think what this movie does really, really interestingly, that kind of no movie does, is that we got three principal characters, but they're like the own heroes in their own story, right? It's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
they all know something and we're with them, but they think they're doing the right thing in their mind. There's no sort of villain. We
No.
don't demonize a husband, we don't demonize a wife. They're all sort of flawed people kind of going on their journey. We can see why he's angry. We can see why she feels isolated in her relationship with him. It's kind of loveless, but the jealousy is forming. It's just so fun to watch this thing pan out. And whenever she has this connection with um, with the other guy, the Baron Fabrizio, he is these moments in these beautiful dance halls where they're just connecting. And the camera, that's something to mention in this movie.
Mm.
For a movie from the 50s, the camera is always sweeping, always in movement, always in flow. Is beautiful to look at. So, what did you think of the performances? I thought, particularly Charles Boyer as the General Andre, I thought he was a standout in this movie. I think his conniving sort of one up on the wife the whole time, always ahead of her without her knowing, and kind of orchestrating everything was. I thought he was fantastic in this. I really enjoyed his scenes.
Yeah, I thought he was great as well. He's the one that they kind of edge towards making him a villain at
Sort of,
times, but
yes.
they don't fully commit to it. Yeah, I think just this interesting relationship that's that's got all these different elements going on, and there's like lying and deceit and gaslighting essentially,
Mhm.
all this stuff going on. I really enjoyed that element of the film. Not to I'm going to have my credentials stripped here, but it just felt like an episode of Love Island. It was great.
Wow, I did not think about that comparison at all. Do you
maybe,
explain?
maybe I've been watching too much Love Island. When somebody's coupled up, and then like somebody else comes in and it turns their head, and maybe they don't want to tell the other person just how much they feel about the other person,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
there's lies and deceit. Maybe been watching too much Love Island. Maybe I should have my cinephile credentials revoked. I'm sure Falmouth University are trying to strip me of my degree as we speak. But yeah, I'm the first and only ever person to compare the earrings of Madame de to Love Island.
That's so funny.
But all jokes aside, just very, I really liked it. I really like you said, sweeping cameras, this lavish lifestyles. Um,
I think it's so full of these really thought provoking quotes. I think it's a very quotable movie. There was like every sort of saying there was something that was said by a character that was kind of profound. I was like, oh, I need to remember that. There's a moment where the countess is sort of being interrogated by Fabrizio, and she says, "It's when we have the most to say that we can't speak." And I thought that's so true. And I think this is kind of what's going on with all these characters is that it's such a mannered time period where everything these sort of adulterating sort of relationships and how they, especially in this aristocracy, the status of these people is very frowned upon, and they have to do everything very secretly. It promotes secretive behavior,
mm,
and everybody has to keep their emotions to themselves. She's sort of just being kind of crushed by the pressure of the lifestyle that she lives in. I it's quite hard. I couldn't register whether to be sympathetic to her or not. She seems to be somebody who's at the end of her tether, has been for some time, and we come in at the beginning of the story where she's kind of been a victim to her relationship, but sort of self-inflicted in her own desires too. It's all about
yeah,
kind of
she
giving
loves a
into
lavish
your
lifestyle,
oh,
doesn't she?
100%. Yes. Yes, and she can't. We don't know how she loses the money. I assume she's the first opening shot of the movie is actually quite interesting because it's just a tracking shot of her hand as it
Mm.
follows all her lavish dresses, and nothing looks the same for the last. Her dressing table is ornate with all this jewelry, and then we pan to the earrings. Um, so it's somebody who is materialistic, but very, very emotional. I mean, she's at odds with herself, and I think that's what interesting about people who live these lavish lifestyles who are such high status is that they are satisfied to a degree of their possessions, but they're never emotionally satisfied. And that's true with a lot of movies we've seen. I think Babylon was kind of similar that we talked about recently. It's excess can go so far, but never takes you the whole way. And
Yeah.
whenever someone new and exciting comes along, it turns your head. Um, so yeah,
Like an
it's
episode of Love Island.
like an episode of I basically just described Love Island. But it's hard. Like you have to feel for it. Like, how can you not be swooned by the Italian Baron Fabrizio? He is such a more of a romantic. He is not as showy. He's more gentle in his approach. The general is obviously more obsessed with. There's a war going on in the background. Um, he's more concerned with that, and his interactions with his wife are more sort of standard and practice worthy. So whenever they go to bed, they sleep in opposite beds in different rooms. That's something. So you can't blame her for wanting more too. She's got it all, but she hasn't.
Yes, yeah, it's almost like a business relationship at the end of the day. It's a payoff. He gets the beautiful wife, she gets the lavish lifestyle, but they do their own things in the meantime, and neither one of them are like overly upset. But there's definitely some jealousy that arises, and that's kind of where this film uh, meets at the end in a
Mm.
pretty tragic ending. Would you say, Chris?
Oh, very tragic, and I think the strength of this movie is its score. I mean, it uses music by Oscar Strauss, which are these swooning strings and orchestras that really like marry well with the camera, and the emotion can be very overwhelming, and I think it mirrors the characters really well too, and adds to the tragedy at the end of the movie. 100%.
Definitely.
I loved it. I thought it was it was exactly the type of movie I would expect on a list like this. I thought it was very very it almost felt like a very prestigey golden era Hollywood movie with a French overcoat on it.
Yeah.
Um, which is exactly in my wheelhouse, and I found it really fun and the dynamics. And going back to my first point, I just really appreciated that nobody here was black and white, that all three characters were the hero in their own story, and we could follow them individually and episodically and feel neutral about them all. And we were just kind of watching the dynamic and how this first small little incident really kind of unfolded into something really big and like you say, tragic at the end.
Chris, the whole film was black and white, mate. The whole film.
Oh, I missed that part.
Stupid jokes. Maybe I'll cut that. I don't think I don't think I loved it as much as you did when I finished it. But the more I think about this film, I really liked it. I really liked it. I don't think it kind of swept me up in it as much as maybe it did you. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And the more I think about it, the more it's only kind of gone higher in my estimation. So yeah, it's one of those films that's kind of sat with me for a bit, and the more I think about it, the more I like it. Very much an enjoyable film, and I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Fantastic. The last movie we got to talk about, we've got two BFIs to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
I seen this movie a couple of months ago, just by coincidence, before we even caught up, proposed to do this list together. And you caught up with it earlier in the week, and that
Yes.
is Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express. Wong Kar-wai is a guy, a very famous Hong Kong filmmaker who we really, really wanted to catch up on and kind of wanted to be completionists anyway, because he is so well regarded in cinema. His work was even referenced in the recent Oscar Best Picture nominee Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's sections of the whole movie that are dedicated to how his movies look, and that's the most important thing in his movies. They're never very plot driven, They're usually a bit more about music, the cinematic language of the camera, and the motion, and how you can use visuals to really tell a story and the mood of a character.
Mm. Yes, his films aren't set in reality in a way. They're
No.
not. They're a lot more kind of heightened emotionally.
Very, yes, and nostalgic, and they romanticize a time period in Hong Kong. It's hard not to fall in love with the city. When it's depicted this way in the '90s, with its beautiful grains and the stutter frames and people going past, everybody looks amazing. Everybody looks so ripped or wearing beautiful extravagant clothes. The neon lit city has this Blade Runner sort of S quality to it all the time, where it's a dystopian but in the now.
Yes, and obviously the political kind of changing of the guards. This is a very Western influenced Hong Kong, and obviously
Sure.
now we're seeing that change.
And I think when you watch a movie like this now, with everything that's going on in Hong Kong, and and how the turmoil going on there the last few years, it's very nostalgic to watch a movie like this and
Mm,
see when Hong Kong was at its sort of at its height.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Um, that being said, and I'm sorry, Chris.
No. I know where you're going with this. Please, please, Al.
God, man, am I? I hated Ant Man. I compared Earrings of Madame de to Love Island. Maybe this isn't my episode, and I didn't love Chungking Express.
Okay. That
Yeah,
I You know what? I think I think Earrings of Madame de, I do not get why you wouldn't love it. I think that movie is great. I Ant-Man totally get.
yeah,
Chucking Express, I can kind of get why you don't like it too. I think it appeals to a certain type of person. It's not very plot heavy, and it takes a
no.
while to get into.
It's do you know what it is? There's a lot of hype around this film.
There
I've
is.
I've heard about this film a lot. I've
Yes.
wanted to see it for a while. I never got around to it, and this was a good time to like force myself to watch it. And I think that there was a time where maybe I would have loved this film. Maybe I'm not sure. My problem is that the first story was not my favorite. So the film is set in two halves. They both follow police officers who are basically hopeless romantics.
Sure.
The first story of the police officer who has been in a relationship that has now failed, and he is kind of mourning that relationship and basically is just trying to find love with any kind of woman he can.
Yeah.
He falls in love with a woman who he doesn't know is involved in basically some underground drug trafficking, and she's
Yes.
on the run
She wears
from.
a trench coat and sunglasses and a wig, and it's very, very mysterious.
Yeah, she basically pulled straight out of like a pulpy gangster movie,
Hmm.
and like those elements are great. Those kind of very stylized elements are great. But his character, I just couldn't get on board with this kind of hopeless romantic that turned
Buying
into this like
pineapples every day. You
he
didn't
was
like the
just
pineapples?
he's I don't know if the film wants you to be sympathetic towards him, but I just saw him as kind of pathetic, and this idea of like this kind of poetry of his kind of narration just didn't work for me, and I didn't care for him at all. Again, I don't know if that's the point, but not caring for either of these characters, not caring for their relationship, not caring for what he was going through took me out of the film, and then the second story had to kind of like pick me up a little bit
Hmm.
to keep me involved. And the second story follows a police officer who it's almost like roles reversed. There's a woman at a cafe, which is kind of the center point of the film in terms of a setting,
Yeah.
and she falls in love with him more than he falls in love with her.
Played by Faye Wong.
She falls in love with him more than he falls in love with her,
Hmm.
and through circumstances ends up getting the keys to his apartment and basically goes into his apartment every day and cleans it
Yes.
and kind of perfects it until he kind of figures it out. And then there's a whole story with a flight attendant and all kinds of stuff going on. Yeah, I mean it was fine. It was fine. Just the hopeless romantic nature of it. just didn't sit well with me. I didn't find a lot of the characters sympathetic, which is a shame because I love Tony Leung, and he's obviously our second police officer.
Yes.
Oh.
I think it's easier to be on board with that character more because he is a victim of a failed relationship that wasn't his fault. And I think, I think the movie is in love with Faye Wan. It's so focused on her and her sort of how she's distracted from the things that probably matter in life. She's just sort of this sort of creature who wants to exist and dance to California Dreaming every day, and distract herself
A lot,
a lot. There's a lot of California Dreaming.
a lot
Yeah,
of California
turn,
Dreaming.
you might need to turn your TV down at these things too because it's blasting. But that's the thing. I think Won Kar-wai is never. It sounds like a bad movie when I say it, but he is never super interested in the characters. He's more obsessed with infatuation and how the language of cinema complements infatuation. And sometimes infatuation comes from not really a place of substance. It comes from just purely seeing somebody who catches your eye,
Mm,
and then getting a crush in your head, like we do as children. We obsess and we wonder how what their lives are out of their normal daily stance, and we build up these sort of pictures in our mind of who they are without actually even knowing them. This movie is kind of just about yearning, I
mm.
think, more than anything. It's nostalgic and everything. I mean, there's Coca-Cola signs everywhere. All this pop culture iconography. The music is so symbolic of the 90s. You got, Faye Wan, who acts in the movie, also does a cover of the Cranberries' Dreams song,
Yes,
which is
yeah. I would have
beautifully
preferred to
used in the movie.
hear that more, I think, than California Dreaming so
Yeah,
much.
because it's so beautiful, that isn't it? And
Yeah.
that mirrors the yearning side of the movie
Mm,
way more. And I think the sort of her going to the apartment every day and playing it's almost like children playing tricks on each other when you flirt
mm.
with somebody, and he knows the whole time. He's just kind of playing along with it too. I thought that was kind of cute. It's these people who aren't kind of living in reality, but he's not interested in the characters, sort of, the black and white of why they pursue things. It's just more about the emotion and hypnotic nature of lust and cinema itself. And sometimes that's enough. I mean, it's one of those movies. When it ended, I thought that's really good, and then weeks later I just kept thinking about it, especially its musical moments. It just kind of kept looping in my mind, and there's just something about his work that is so different from any other filmmaker out there, and very influential. It's hard not to fall in love with it sometimes.
Maybe.
I know, but I think it.
No,
Yeah.
I'm in the minority here. I've checked Letterbox. I don't know what I'm missing that other people have connected to this film. Maybe it was just the time, the place, the mood. I don't know, but I just wasn't swept up by it, and I didn't buy into this kind of romanticism idea of it all. Yeah, I thought the first character was just a bit of an incel, and
I I think we don't get enough time, perhaps, maybe with him.
yeah,
This is
the first story is very short compared to the second half
Yeah,
of the film. Well,
this
not even
is.
second half. It's like the three-quarters of the film is the second story, essentially.
I haven't seen every Wong Kar-wai film yet. I've kind of been exploring his earlier work, kind of building up to this. And in those movies I have seen so far, that tends to be the thing. He never really focuses on one character. They're usually quite episodic, and he focuses
Mm,
on a myriad of people. And one or two tend to kind of be left to the side or complement or kind of an appetizer to the main story.
yes. Yeah.
That's kind of how I saw it. Yeah, but it's interesting though. I thought it's a very interesting piece of work. I think it is definitely more reliant on the mood and the visuals and the music as opposed to the story. But that's what you're going to get from a Wong Kar Wai movie. And most people, like, when you hear me say that, that sounds like a bad excuse for a bad movie. It's not. I think he does puts enough texture in the visuals and what he's trying to portray that it kind of you could listen, you could watch the movie without any dialogue, and you can get completely what he's going for.
Yeah, I think maybe his films deserve multiple watches, and
And maybe seeing in the big screen on a cinema with
yeah,
a like-minded audience as well.
and maybe not having that hype as well will help, because I know
YouTube videos of Tarantino telling you why the movie's amazing.
yeah, I think as well, because as we further on this list, as we get to the end, probably at the end of the year, the number 5 film on this list is In the Mood for Love, which is a film you and I have both seen. I can't remember what you think about it, Chris.
I haven't watched In the Mood for Love yet.
Have you not? Okay, see, I wasn't blown away by In the Mood for Love, and I'm going to rewatch it, I think, when we get to number 5, because I think having
Mm.
lower expectations potentially of the film might lead me to watch it in a different way. So we'll find out later in the year when we get to that one, and maybe one day I'll revisit Chungking Express as well, and that. But I definitely want to see more Wong Wor-kai, because I'm just intrigued by Wong Kar-wai. Sorry, yeah, I'm just intrigued by his filmography and the status it has, and yeah, I mean, no doubt it's a good looking film. Also, I kind of forgot it was set in 1994 because the visuals of it make it look like a film from the early 2000s. I don't mean that in a bad way.
No, I
Just
get what
it
you
feels
mean.
like the color grading, the kind of digital elements to it, like the way
Oh
it's
yeah,
very jumpy with its action scenes and stuff like that. Just it feels like a very
and
stylized 2000s movie.
and maybe that's why people who saw it in '94 were so excited to buy it. Buy it. It was
100%.
very forward thinking for its time, and I think, like I said, mentioned Tarantino was one of those people from the Western culture that kind of brought Wong Kar-wai to a lot of people's attention. He saw Chungking Express when he was over in Hong Kong, and he was so taken by it that he just helped distribute it
Yeah.
in the West. So that's why there's so much legacy behind this movie. I feel like In the Mood for Love is like people kind of agree is his magnum opus movie.
Mm.
So I'm really looking forward to exploring that. But interested to see why you were as reluctant. Perhaps I might feel the same way. So we'll be discussing that in the future. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I think that was
Well,
interesting discussions there on Ant-Man, Earrings of Madame De, Chunking Express.
there is no other podcast that is talking about these three movies this week. I think we've I can be proud about that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a good thing, isn't it? Like, it's pairing some really strange films together. We are, however, going to take a little break from the BFI Sight and Sound list. And by a little break, me and Chris are still going to continue watching the films, but we're not going to be talking about any of the BFI Sight
Yeah.
and Sound films next week. We are actually going to be ranking the Best Picture nominations together. Well, not together. We're both going to have our own ranking list, and
Okay. Secret.
secret, yes. And then, oh yeah, is behind the scenes of the podcast right here. Is that what you understood of the project? I don't know.
I was going to discuss it with you later, but we usually keep things secret, don't we? I think that keeps it a bit more exciting. And then, if I hear something outrageous, then I can spark anger in the moment and go straight for your jugular.
Fair enough, fair enough. But yeah, I think that will lead us into a more interesting conversation about the Oscars overall, and
Yeah,
maybe our thoughts.
we both only have the one Best Picture nominee left to see, so
Yes.
we should be ready.
Yeah, we both just have to watch Triangle of Sadness before the next recording, which shouldn't be too difficult. So
Absolutely.
nice one. So yeah, look forward to speaking to you then, Chris. In the
Absolutely.
meantime, guys, follow us on our Instagram, follow us on our TikTok for all the cringe, and yeah, keep sharing us with friends and family, etc., etc. This has been the Film Angle for this week. I'm Alex.
And I'm Chris.
Goodbye and good night.
See you later.